You know, I was reading through my message in the book of James, and then I saw the song that was chosen when Buddy had chosen Let There Be Peace on Earth, and let it begin with me. And, you know, I've been here for a little over 5 years. And when I first came, I did what maybe people would think is a little radical. I started in the book of Matthew 25, and the piece that it says over here when it says, "The righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters, you did for me." And so I stayed up till 3 o'clock this morning as I think Kamana Seymour and I were still emailing. How do you stay up that late? I don't know. And it's because this thing has been bugging me, and I noticed that nobody talks about it. And so I decided that I'm going to talk about it. Okay, so in 2019, I created this vision plan for this church. And this is just a little part of the letter that I wrote to our congregation. And I said, "I believe we have done immense harm to the marginalized in the name of God, and I feel increasingly guilty when attending a church I cannot invite people to. But I love the community. I am both pro-life and anti-abortion. But it's not just about abortion. It's about people in prisons being treated terribly. It's about inequality in the workplace. There are people who don't think systematic racial injustice exists. An evangelical young person becoming more liberal, while older evangelical thinks that these kids have been brainwashed by the world." So I asked the question, what is our church's stance on child bullying, on public education, on sexuality education, on civil and human rights, on gun control, on human trafficking, on immigration, and so on and so forth? And so what this has done is it just enraged me, not you, it enraged me. Because I was reading my denomination newsletters that keep coming in for the United Church of Christ. And yesterday, as I was reading, Peter McCurry, who's in our national office, he is the United Church of Christ Global Relations Minister for the Middle East and Europe, and he is also the executive for Wider Church Missions, which participates in global, multiracial, multicultural churches and supports our UCC ministries in the United States and around the world. And this past Tuesday, on December 5th, he spoke at the United Nations because he was invited there months and months prior. And his invitation to speak there was planned well before the October 7th date when the Middle East conflict came about. And so, at this, he started talking, and he condemned the ongoing violence and human rights violations against Palestinians. He said, "Little did any of us know when these sessions were going on, when we were planning, that we would be in the depths of such a tragic the violence that is happening now. Our churches understand where we can and must participate in policy debates, but that we have a particular place in raising the moral voice of society to reject injustice and suffering. According to the UN, more than 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza alone. More than half, over 50%, have been children and women. Tens of thousands more have been wounded in Gaza and the West Bank. When a powerful army occupies and annexes the land of another people, when the population is displaced in massive numbers, when towns and cities are destroyed, when occupied forces commit crimes prohibiting international law and conventions, what does the world do? As Peter Macari continues, in the case of Russia invasion over Ukraine, the world condemned it. But in the case of decades-long Israeli occupation and annexation of Palestinian lands, massive forced displacement, more than 1.8 million Palestinians in Gaza within these last couple weeks, Western powers have blamed the victim. He quoted that a Palestinian Christian pastor observed, "This has exceeded our expectations in terms of global silence. Human rights and international law have been discredited." The International Day of Solidarity started with this Nakba in 1948. The catastrophe, the disposition after World War II, the disposition of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in the adoption of this thing called the Universal Declaration, and it goes on and on. And it kind of bothered me, because we never talk about this Israeli and Palestinian thing. I don't know why we don't, but we don't. So I'm going to take you to what a millennial pastor has said. And this millennial pastor is this Reverend Mia McLean, who's a pastor of the Riverside Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., who spoke about this very subject in October when this was just happening. And so this is a millennial perspective. And she takes us to the book of Nehemiah, talking about peace. Nehemiah 5, verses 1 through 13. Instead of me reading, Michelle, can you come? Come on. I need somebody to read this. Does this work? Naolo? It works. Read the book of Nehemiah. Through the voice of a millennial.
Nehemiah deals with oppression. Now, there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish kin. For there were those who said, "With our sons and our daughters, we are many, we must get grain, so that we may eat and stay alive." There were also those who said, "We're having to pledge our fields, our vineyards, and our houses in order to get grain during the famine." And there were those who said, "We're having to borrow money on our fields and our vineyards to pay the king's tax. Now our flesh is the same as that of our kindred. Our children are the same as their children. And yet we're forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been ravished. We are powerless, and our fields and vineyards now belong to others." I was very angry when I heard the outcry and these complaints. After thinking it over, I contended with the nobles and the officials. I said to them, "You're all talking entrance from your own people," and I called a great assembly to deal with them, and said to them, "As far as we're able, we have bought back our Jewish kindred who have been sold to other nations. But now we're selling your own kin, who must then be bought back by us." They were silent and could not find a word to say. So I said, "The thing that you're doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our God to prevent the taunts of the nations, our enemies? Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us stop this taking of interest. Restore to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive orchards, and their houses, and the interest on money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been exacting for them. Then they said, we will restore everything and demand nothing more from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priests and made them take an oath to do as they had promised. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out everyone from house and from property who does not perform this promise. Thus may take be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, Amen, and praise the Lord. And the people did as they had promised.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I know that was a long passage, but what this is telling us is that in Palestine, olive trees have been around for hundreds and even thousands of years. And these trees have obviously become an automatic connection to the people. And during the olive harvest in October, families normally pick olives from their grove, which they have been doing for generations and eons. In recent years, Palestinian olive trees have come under attack by settlers who occupy the West Bank. According to the UN, more than 5,000 of these olive trees belonging to these West Bank Palestinians were vandalized in the first 5 months of 2023. It is harvest season. October is olive harvesting month. Yet instead of harvesting, people are dying. What is meant to be a season of gleaning and reaping has been a season of bombing and gassing. Innocent people picking olives in a field in Gaza were murdered, and all we can say here today in the other parts of the world is, well, those are those people over there. Why are we worrying about them? There are two groups battling each other, and this is just a casualty of unresolved tensions in the region before and since the Nakba of 1948. It is a harvest season even here in America. And instead of picking pumpkins, if you notice in months and even throughout the years, in the recent years, families of 18 victims of a massacre in Maine that just happened in October are now, instead of picking pumpkins, they were picking caskets and urns for their families. Instead of harvesting, they were burying. Instead of reaping, they were weeping. People in this book of Nehemiah, in chapter 5, are complaining to Nehemiah about this very issue, about their living conditions, about their social status, about their olive orchards that have been seized and even taxed, and the things these olive trees have seen throughout the years. The people of Israel have been oppressed with limited freedom under this Persian rule. But prior to the Persian rule, they just came out of the rule of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, and now they're in this Persian rule. And so the Persian king puts into place this man named Nehemiah. The people are complaining to Nehemiah. He is one of them, but he is not one of them. He's sort of like this liaison between the government and the people. The people are complaining because they are weary, they are worn, they are being taken advantage of by their own ohana. They are complaining to Nehemiah, and their homes, they are distant cousins, all these people. They're distant cousins, the ones who share the same connection to the land as they do. But their great-great-great-great-grandfathers couldn't get along with each other. And so they are complaining to Nehemiah because their homes are being taken, their precious olive orchards are getting wasted, and their oils are confiscated and taxed. And now their children are being sold into servitude. Now, can you put up this? Well, thing that I sent you? Chance to read this. Because this is, I was looking at this thing. War is a place where young people who don't know each other and don't hate each other kill each other based on the decisions made by old people who know each other and hate each other but don't want to kill each other. You got it? So instead of them, the great-great-granddaddies killing each other, they send the young ones out to go murder each other on behalf of them. And that is what war has been doing for eons and eons. And this is what is happening here in Gaza. These are ohana, these are families. And so what does Nehemiah do? Well, I can tell you what Nehemiah doesn't do. Nehemiah doesn't call a prayer meeting. Nehemiah doesn't host a prayer vigil. Nehemiah doesn't hold a fundraiser like canned goods or even olive oil drive. Nehemiah calls a public forum. Nehemiah gathers the people into a town meeting. He calls those who have been exploiting their ohana to the carpet. Nehemiah says, we are going to do public business in public. We are asking for public accountability in the eyes of the public. We are holding up evil deeds in broad daylight because the God that we serve is the God who cares about how we treat our neighbors who till the same soil as us. We all grow the same thing because the God we serve despises entitlement, despises displacement of others, despises possessions of land. And we come to this public forum, Nehemiah says, to call people in power to the carpet so that we can dismantle this genocidal practice that we've been doing in every part of the world. Now, genocide isn't about bombing only. Let's get that clear. All the powerful entity has to do is divest itself from the people because it can. Because it has the power to. So, what is genocide? Genocide can look like divesting from school systems in certain neighborhoods, treating charter schools like a stepchild, or homeschooling like it's not real education. Genocide can look like depriving certain people of voting power. Genocide can look like removing easy access to suitable food, as it says here in the book of Nehemiah, or even down the street here in Honolulu. Genocide can look like removing affordable access to health care so that certain people die from preventable diseases because medicine costs way too much for the normal person. Nehemiah is right in line with Moses, with the prophets, with Jesus of Nazareth. He understands that the people's liberation is connected to the restoration. Let me tell you this. People's liberation is connected to the restoration of their food sources in the Lo'i. The restoration of their water sources in Waihole, in Kapukai, Red Hill, Navai Eha, in Maui. The restoration of their economic sources, Kaka'ako Makai, where they give us 30 acres and then they tell us that we cannot build something over 5 stories, yet all of the developers on the other side of the road can build condominiums, as you can well see, well over 40 stories high. And yet, us Kanaka cannot even build anything for our economic engine. That is genocide. And if we were to follow the steps of what was read, we will be unashamedly shouting for the restoration of the least of these, as I told you in Matthew 25. But there is a problem. There is a problem with this. There is a problem. I can't find it. This thing, this Baibala, there is a problem with this text. And it's not the text itself. It's not the passage that I'm talking about. There's a problem in the way this text has been used for generations and generations by the powerful. There are more texts, if you read it, there are more texts in this Bible about money and commerce and almost any other category. And I'd like to add that there is a significant number of texts about Aina, about land, about war over land, about God giving somebody else's land and laying siege to land. It's about this land is your land, this land is my land, but now I like your land. This text is problematic. It is an unsettling text to read, that the people's understanding of God's promised land was connected with the destruction and the death of others. And who are the others that were occupied in this promised land? Some of the people are called the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and many other people. It's unsettling that even in Nehemiah's memoirs, the memories of God's restoration, as declared by the writer, involves subduing the indigenous inhabitants of a promised land and displacing them so that you can occupy it. It doesn't happen only over there. People across faiths, predominantly Judaism and Christianity, have used this text about land to justify possession of already occupied territories. And in some cases, create genocide against these people. And so I call out Christianity at this moment. I call out Christianity intentionally here because that's what we are gathering around. It was the Christian folk in America who enslaved another race so that they would be their laborers in their southern plantations. It was the Christian folk who prompted the Trail of Tears of the Native American Indians. It was the Christian folk who enacted genocide of the indigenous people of the continental United States. And it was the Christian folk who overthrew the kingdom of Hawaii. So I'm telling you, they use this Bible when they're not, and it's not God, it's people that use this divine text against each other. But we cannot despair. We cannot afford to despair. We cannot tell our children that there is no hope. And that's why, if you notice, our people have been talking all this morning, because last week I changed my title to the audacity of hope. To think that you can even dream that you can get back what you already had. It's the audacity to hope. And today, I'm changing another one. It's the absurdity of peace, to be so absurd that I think that the whole world one day will live in peace with each other rather than warring on each other. It is the audacity to think that you and I will fall in love with each other rather than hate each other. That is the audacity that God gives us, that you and I will meld into one and we will be one people under God, that all humanity will be brothers and sisters, not enemies. And so that is the dismantling of the power structures. But it only happens if all we do is we sit down and we keep the vote in our pockets rather than getting out into the polls and go, I don't think I really understand what you're doing and I don't like what you're doing. And that is our job. If it's for the people, by the people, and with the people, who's the people? The people, the kanaka, it's you and me. But if we don't get out there and go and do something, our job is not to just sit down and watch it happen, because complacency just means that we agree. You either agree or you disagree. So how do we find peace? The audacity to think that we can have peace in this world. That's our job here, so that you and I both know that you got my back and I got your back. That I know that I can go to one shopping center without somebody pulling out a gun. That I know that one of my family, who probably is a woman, can go in the dark of night. Like, what was that? Kanawai Mamalhoy? You know, it's the law of the broken paddle, where old folks with children, where women can walk freely in this land. Have we forgotten? Because we're so far removed from the time of Kamehameha I, so far removed from Kamehameha V, who said, let's put our people back together. But we sit here talking victimization. When are you going to be sick and tired of being sick and tired and stand up and do something for yourself? I'm not talking about you, but you know what I mean. We get the story, right? I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm sick and tired of seeing wars. And all I'm going to do, there's nothing wrong with it. That the power of prayer is wonderful. But how do we do the power of prayer along with the action? And that's what people in our denomination do, is they go into the United Nations. They even go into the war-torn zones. How do we be a part of positive affirmation to bring peace back into the world? Let there be peace on earth, oh God, and let it begin with me. Amen.